Hello and welcome. My name is Fredrik Zillen and I'm your running technique specialist, and this episode is all about how studies on running technique can be wrong. I always think that it is great if there is a well-made study that shows how things work. Just take this for example, that I've already made a video on, whether you recover best after an interval if you rest when you stand still and have your hands on your head, or if you recover better when you stand still and have your hands on your knees. Since it is possible to measure how well a group of runners recover after an interval, it's also easy to conclude which of these two ways of resting, which position that is the best. And that was hands on the knees, not hands on head. And there you have it. It is great that there are studies that take the guesswork out of what's best. But today I thought I'd talk about how things can go wrong in studies. For example, when it comes to cadence and how to land heel or forefoot. Here we go! The inspiration for this video came from a social media post made by a coach where he was talking about running technique. By referring to various studies, he was able to show that you never really have to think about your running technique, because the way you run, like just normally, is the way that is best for each individual. And since the self-selected way of running is always best, you shouldn't, well, unless you have very strong reasons to do so, try to adjust your running technique at all. That was his conclusion. And I do like what he did there. He didn't just blurt out something, but he referred to various studies. But how about if we take a look at what those studies showed? We can start with the one about cadence called Self-optimization of stride length among experienced and inexperienced runners. It is quite easy to measure whether a change in cadence is costing more or less energy. You simply measure how much oxygen is used when you run. And that's what was done in this study with 33 runners, 19 whom were experienced and 14 more inexperienced. They ran for 20 minutes, varying their cadence between their usual cadence or plus or minus 8 or 16% of their usual cadence. To help them change their cadence, they used a metronome and were instructed to put their foot down on the treadmill in time with the beeping of the metronome. And what they found was that the least oxygen was consumed at the self-selected cadence. At higher or lower cadence than the natural one is therefore less efficient. But dear researchers, I have several objections to the design of this study. Firstly, cadence is largely a consequence of how runners move. I've said it before and I say it again. When you do a pirouette in figure skating, you go slow if you hold your arms out to the side and fast if you hold them close to your body. And if you change the angles of different joints when running and adjusting the hip position, get runners to relax a little bit more in different parts of the body, you can make them change the cadence without telling them to change the cadence. It just happens by itself. Here's a runner who was at my running technique studio a couple of days ago. At first, he had a cadence of 173. I then gave him some tips on angles and relaxation before we did another test. I didn't say anything about the cadence. But at the next test, he had a cadence of 188. Then I asked, did you think about increasing your cadence? And the answer was, no, I didn't think about the cadence at all. Now, the cadence was perhaps a little bit too high for this runner's goal, but we fixed that in the rest of the session. My point is that if you want to change the cadence, you should not try to force a higher cadence by using a metronome. What you did, dear scientists, is comparable to asking a figure skating person doing a pirouette with the arms out here and then saying, well, keep your arms there, but spin faster. Of course that costs more energy. Change some angles. And in addition, the runners put their feet down in time with the metronome. There is a huge difference in whether you say put your feet down in time with the metronome or the music and lift your feet in time with the metronome or music. No, you shouldn't lift higher just because I say lift in time with the music and metronome, but the instruction down, well, in principle always gives longer contact time. Try it yourself and you'll see. Turn on some music or a metronome when running with the right BPM, then run a few beats when you think about putting your feet down, down, down in the tempo, and then a few beats when you think lift, 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 lift in time with the music. And then switch back and forth and see which one is heavier and which one is much easier. You will probably feel that the down, down is much harder. But that was the instructions the runners in the study got. No wonder it cost more energy. Let's go to the next point. There, the coach claimed in the post I read that your habitual foot strike is optimal for you. So you don't have to worry about whether you put your heel or your forefoot down first when you run. I agree with that in itself. There are no studies that show that one way is more economical or gives more or less risk of injury. But also here I think that the study referred to economy and rate of carbohydrate oxidation during running with rear foot and forefoot strike patterns. The titles of studies. It has a strange setup, I think, when, just like in the study on the Cadence, it's mostly about forcing a change. They tested how much energy it cost for heel strikers and forefoot strikers at slow, medium and fast pace, and found no significant difference between the two groups. Both ways cost about the same amount of energy. The heel strikers were then asked to land more on their forefoot and the forefoot strikers more on their heel. It turned out that those who landed on the heel from the start got a worse economy of forefoot strike, but it didn't make that much difference for the forefoot strikers to go to heel strike. And this is not so strange at all, because which part of the foot, the shoe that touches the ground first, is rarely important. What matters is where it lands in relation to your center of mass and your hip and how it moves towards the ground. And when a heel striker is instructed to land on the forefoot, it's kind of like in these pictures I taken from Instagram, where the person who made the post is trying to show how much better a runner she is in the picture to the right. But if we look at what she has done, she has not improved where she lands in relation to her center of mass. She has mostly just pushed her forefoot down, which means that the foot is put down further forward in relation to the center of mass and her hip than in the picture on the left. So it does not automatically get better just because it was a forefoot strike. If instead she had landed more under her body like this, it would probably have been better. There would also have been more midfoot forefoot landing. And then maybe she says, well, now I'm running more on my forefoot or midfoot than before, and this is why this is better. And that is not wrong. But it's not because the landing is more forefoot or midfoot, it's because it's further under the body. What people hear is that she has changed from heel striker to forefoot midfoot striker, which almost leads to them starting to run like in the picture on the right, which costs more energy. So my objection to the whole thing was that the coach's conclusion of the study was your habitual foot strike is optimal for you. No, it really doesn't have to be like that. Sure, one is not automatically better than the other, talking about heel strike or forefoot strike, but if I get a runner to go from the picture on the left to the picture on the right, both I and the runner will be happy as the foot placement is better, even if she's mostly feeling it like she's gone from heel strike to midfoot strike. So your habitual foot strike or cadence is not always optimal for you. And switching technique does not have to take a long time. Adjusting your running technique can be very quick and have a very positive effect on your running. And that's it for today. See you in another video.